racing!
Welcome everyone to my review of Hot Wheels Turbo Racing, and you might be saying, a Hot Wheels game? Yeah, this is actually a pretty decent racing game that I happened to stumble upon, originally for the PS1, and this is the N64 version here that I actually kind of like better these days. You'll see up here, going through all the choices of cars you get in the very beginning. My favorite is the black stealth car. I eventually open a ton more as you beat more options in the game. You open a bunch more tracks, going through all these here. Snake Encounter, Road to Rustwell, Cold Fusion, Command Center, Helicrash, which is annoying, and Dawn Encounter, and Snake River Mine. Those are all the original courses that you get, and those form the very first tournament, the Hot Wheels Cup, that you go into. There are also a couple other modes like airtime based on tricks, and time trials, different things like that. Here's a good example of the first course, the very beginning here. And it's a very interesting game because it feels a lot like something like Need for Speed or that type of semi-arcadey type racer mixed with something like SSX that's very, very trick-based. You go in here, it's very, let's see, do a bunch of backflips, and this is a good example of failing. There you go, whoop, whoop, and car resetting. That does highlight one of the problems with the game right off the bat as I'm kind of getting back into the swing of playing it here. The tricks are very, very easy to pull off. Your car flips and does all this crazy stuff very easily, but it's also a little too loose. That's one of the major problems with the control in this game, is that going around corners and everything, it feels okay, but part of the problem is it feels a little slippery. It's a little hard. You go a little bit to the right, you end up making a quarter turn to the right. Makes a lot of precision controls a little more difficult. You have to get a little more used to it, but it is still very fun, and it makes pulling off the tricks, like I said, very, very simple. See here, Mir, almost going out of control there with the spins. Another good example of that. A lot of the tracks are very, very interesting. There's a lot of great designs, so it really works as a very fun, simple racing game, something that's going to blow you away. But it adds that trick element that I really, really like, and it's something very unique. It's not a very serious street racer, it's not like an Initial D drift racer, and it's also not a kart racer like Mario Kart or Crash Team Racing or Speed Punks. It's something that's very much in between all of those and is fairly unique. It is a little more reminiscent of a lot of other Hot Wheels type games, but this one in particular, I've actually played a couple over the years, feels a little bit less like playing with your old toys on a track. A lot of those other ones, they either make the mistake of making it go a little more too much toward the toy childhood nostalgia factor, and it doesn't feel like a real racing. It feels more like you're moving around little cars, or they take it too far towards the realism, and it no longer feels like Hot Wheels. And this one has a really good balance between the two. The tracks are very, unrealistic, but they're not super goofy, so it still has that sort of almost realistic feel enough to keep you interested in the game. And the cars are the same way, all the turbo boosting. It feels very much like a hybrid of a very, very arcadey racer and something a little more realistic. As you go through all the crazy twists and turns of the tracks here, you're going to need to do all those tricks in a very similar way, again, to SSX, where doing tricks will earn you boost in the bottom left corner there in the way that you would earn boost on the right-hand side of the screen in SSX by doing tricks. And you'll use that boost throughout the race, especially on little points here. Without boost, you wouldn't have made it across those, and if I had two boosts there, 2 or 3, I would have made it the whole way across both of those and gotten even farther ahead of everyone. But you really have to balance in this doing tricks versus just straight up racing because of things like that. You can be a little too overambitious with the really, really loose controls and try and pull off some insane stunt with 30 or 40 flips and some of the larger things. But you have to be careful where if you do go a little nuts and you fail, you not only don't get those points, but there's a fairly long reset period for your car. It has to flip or do whatever it's doing and blow up and then reset, and then you kind of get to go. So you have to be a little more conservative sometimes, especially if you're in a really, really close race. Another nice thing you'll see as I'm going along here is frequently in many of the tracks, especially the later ones, there will be a lot of different pathways you can take, and it's kind of a fun game to explore, where right up here you can either go to the left there and go up that ramp and go through a jump, or go the safe path, which I took on this particular route here. And that's one thing that keeps the game fresh a little bit longer. It's not only unlocking new cars and new tracks, but each track has multiple pathways. None of them are really too extreme, but it's just enough, a little bit of an extra, to keep the game fun. And you saw those right in there, those sort of wheelbarrow looking things made of stone going up and down, and you can actually run into those and they'll blow up your car, and there's all kinds of little hazards like that through most of these. And that's another thing that adds sort of a little, just an element of fun, is you have all these power-ups as you're going by, and all, doing all the tricks and using the turbo, different pathways, and little bits of environmental hazards. Speaking of the power-ups though, they're kind of useless. Some of them I never even really figured out what they did, just because you don't really, they seem kind of pointless. Some of them have better grip, some of them have just all these different like little minor effects that don't really seem to have much of an effect on the overall place during a race. And here I am, finishing the final lap in this leg of the race, ending up in first place. Here I go, here I go. Am I gonna make it? Last jump here. And yes I do, first place. And this right here though, this, out of the original tracks, this one right here could actually make you quit the game, but move past it and you'll actually unlock much better tracks here. This one's hella crash. And this one, you go through the first leg of the race, you go up through this checkpoint, and the point is to go to the top and then turn around and go back almost kind of the way you came, but go through a separate door that continues to the rest of the track, and you have to do that every single lap. And it's frustrating because sometimes that exit door that I just went through won't open fast enough, and you'll actually be almost penalized for being in first place by having that door crash into you. And the other thing too, every single lap, when you go up to the top and you have to turn around, with these kind of loose controls that it has, it's very hard to make a nice easy turnaround, and everyone else is right behind you. So you end up turning around and smashing right into an oncoming car and resetting right in front of where you were. So when that car that smashed into you goes past you and turns itself around, once you regenerate, you're right back in front of that car, and there's a 9 out of 10 chance it'll smash you again. So it can be very frustrating on this course. But other than that, most of the courses are actually really well designed. They're a lot of fun. This is something where more of the fun is in the multiplayer though than the single player. And single player is really just some time trials, trying to see how many cool tricks you can pull off in doing these tournaments here. But they're really not that fun. And as you can see, I'm getting straight first place in every single one, and I'm on whatever the middle difficulty is, normal. So it's a fairly easy game. It doesn't get much harder. I tried a couple just brief races on easy and the harder difficulties, and there really wasn't that much of a difference between the difficulty settings. So again, multiplayer is not only more fun with friends, but it's more fun because your friends might be more of a challenge than the computers. And the reason why I am reviewing the N64 version of this game in particular is because of the differences between the two. It's very odd because the majority of the time, not 100%, but the majority of the time, if a game was released on PS1 and N64, the PS1 version 9 out of 10 times was the clear, superior version. But in this case, it's a little bit of give and take. The PlayStation version of this game is a little bit better visually. You can see a little more detail in the cars, the lighting is a little bit better. Everything visually is just a little bit better. Nothing extreme, but just you can actually see a noticeable difference if you've played it a few hours. But that comes at a cost. The N64 version, of course, has no load times, while the PS1 version has some fairly long load times. It's more of just when you're starting up a tournament or a level, you might have to sit there for 10-15 seconds sometimes while it loads. But when you go through little menus and things like this, there isn't a loading time, so it's not terrible, but it's very noticeable. And it's sort of, which would you prefer? It's a personal choice, I feel like. the loading times for better visuals, or, you know, the other way around. And for me personally, if this was a game where visuals were a huge deal, I might pick the PS1 version, but it's a Hot Wheels racing game. I'd rather just not have to wait for a loading screen. And here you see I won everything and unlocked a bunch of stuff. And also with the N64 version, there isn't as much sound compression as there is sometimes with the N64 version of a game. So it really doesn't lose that compared to the CD version of the game. Otherwise, they're basically identical. It's really, you know, do you prefer the loading times with better graphics or the other way around? Up to you. Overall, a very, very solid racing game, a very fun racing game. Again, nothing stellar, but something that is incredibly cheap and easy to find on both systems. So you have a PS1 or an N64. I suggest you pick it up if you see it. It's a lot of fun with friends. Just plug it in and play for a few hours. Again, not going to change your life, but overall, a pretty decent racer.